Samuel Whitehorse froze mid-step, his weathered hand gripping the GPS tracker he'd just pried from the steel trap. The device was still warm, still beeping, military-grade, not some poacher's crude setup. 40 yards away, a massive black bear with impossible blue eyes watched him without moving. Eleanor Blackwood's scream shattered the morning silence as she stumbled from her cabin, seeing the blood-soaked trap that had held her secret for 8 years. The metal contraption lay twisted and broken, its jaws stained crimson, while the ancient Cherokee veterinarian stood between her and the bear she'd raised from a cub. "Spirit," Ellie whispered, her voice cracking as memories flooded back. Bottle-feeding the orphaned cub, hiding her from authorities, watching her grow into the magnificent creature now standing before them. Sam's eyes darted between the GPS tracker and the approaching bear, his mind racing with terrible possibilities. Who had been hunting Spirit specifically? And why was this wild animal walking straight toward the humans who could destroy everything? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Great Smoky Mountains had shaped Samuel Whitehorse's soul for 68 years, but today felt different. The morning mist clung to the ancient peaks like spirits of his Cherokee ancestors, whispering warnings he couldn't quite decipher. Sam adjusted his worn leather satchel, filled with veterinary supplies he legally shouldn't possess, and stepped deeper into the forest that had become both his sanctuary and his penance. 3 years had passed since the accident. 3 years since he'd failed to pick up his granddaughter Emma from school because of an emergency call about a wounded deer. 3 years since that phone call changed everything. Emma's bright laughter silenced forever by a drunk driver who walked away without a scratch. The guilt ate at him like acid, especially during these solitary walks where her memory haunted every trail. Eleanor Blackwood lived alone in the weathered cabin that had sheltered 4 generations of her family. At 81, she possessed the fierce independence of mountain women who'd raised children during the Depression and buried husbands too young. Her property sprawled across 200 acres of pristine wilderness, a green island surrounded by the encroaching development that threatened everything she held sacred. Ellie's days followed a careful routine. Each dawn she'd shuffle to her kitchen window, arthritic fingers wrapping around her coffee cup as she scanned the tree line. Most folks assumed she was just a lonely widow watching for birds, but Ellie harbored a secret that would shock the conservative mountain community. For 8 years, she'd been mother to a creature that shouldn't exist in her world. A black bear with eyes the color of winter sky. The bear had appeared as a starving cub, barely alive after witnessing her mother's brutal death at the hands of poachers. Ellie found her collapsed near the old oak tree where her late husband had proposed 53 years earlier. Something about those unusual blue eyes reminded her of her own lost children. 2 miscarriages and a son who'd grown distant with success. Spirit, as Ellie named her, defied every rule about wild animals. She'd learned to approach the cabin only when Ellie was alone, to accept food without aggression, and somehow to sense when her human mother needed comfort most. During Ellie's darkest nights, when loneliness pressed against her chest like a physical weight, Spirit would appear at the edge of the clearing, those intelligent eyes offering silent companionship. Meanwhile, 200 miles away in Nashville, Richard Blackwood stared at medical bills that threatened to destroy everything he'd built. His wife Sarah's cancer treatments had already cost them their savings, their second home, and nearly their marriage. The experimental therapy that might save her life came with a price tag that made his stomach clench: $400,000. The solution sat in a manila folder on his mahogany desk. Development contracts for his mother's mountain property. The land was worth millions to the right buyer, enough to save Sarah and secure their daughter's future. All he had to do was convince a stubborn old woman to abandon the only home she'd ever known. The morning sun filtered through the canopy as Sam followed the blood trail that led from the abandoned trap toward Eleanor Blackwood's property. Each crimson drop on the fallen leaves told a story of pain and determination, and something about the spacing suggested the wounded animal was moving with purpose rather than panic. Sam had tracked hundreds of injured creatures over his decades as a veterinarian, but this trail felt different, deliberate, almost human in its logic. As he crested the small hill that overlooked Ellie's cabin, Sam heard something that stopped him cold. Through the open kitchen window drifted the soft, crooning voice of an elderly woman singing an old hymn, but underneath it was another sound that shouldn't exist, a deep, rumbling response that could only come from a very large animal. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound!" Ellie's voice wavered with age but carried true. "That saved a wretch like me." The answering rumble came again, almost harmonious, as if someone, or something, was attempting to sing along. Sam crept closer, his Cherokee training making his footsteps silent on the forest floor. What he saw through the cabin's back window defied everything he knew about wild animal behavior. Eleanor Blackwood sat in her kitchen chair, her weathered hands gently cleaning a massive wound on the hind leg of a black bear that lay calmly on her floor. The bear's extraordinary blue eyes were fixed on Ellie's face with an expression of complete trust and something deeper, genuine affection. "There now, Spirit," Ellie murmured, dabbing antiseptic on the trap wounds. "Mama's got you. Those evil men won't hurt you anymore." The bear, Spirit, made soft huffing sounds in response, as if carrying on a conversation only the two of them understood. Sam's breath caught in his throat. In 40 years of veterinary practice, he'd never witnessed such a bond between human and wild animal. This wasn't the result of recent domestication or zoo conditioning. This was something profound, built over years of mutual trust and love. "I know you're there, Sam Whitehorse," Ellie called without turning around. "Your grandfather taught you to walk quietly, but these old ears still work fine. Come on in before someone sees you gawking." Embarrassed at being detected, Sam approached the back door slowly. Spirit's head turned toward him, those unusual blue eyes assessing but not threatening. When Ellie nodded at the bear, Spirit relaxed, apparently accepting Sam based entirely on her trust in the old woman. 8 years, Ellie said as Sam entered her kitchen, his eyes never leaving the massive animal. "Found her as a cub, barely alive after poachers killed her mama. Couldn't just let her die, you understand? Had to bottle feed her for months before she was strong enough to make it on her own." "Mrs. Blackwood," Sam began, his voice tight with concern, "she's a wild animal. This is incredibly dangerous, not to mention illegal. If the authorities find out—" "Authorities," Ellie snorted. "Where were the authorities when those men killed her mother? Where were they when she was starving and scared?" She continued cleaning Spirit's wounds with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. "Spirit here has been more family to me than most humans. She comes when I'm lonely, protects me from the bears that might actually cause trouble, and never once has she hurt me." Sam knelt beside the bear, his veterinary instincts overriding his shock. The trap wounds were deep but clean, and Ellie had done remarkable work keeping infection at bay. "These are fresh," he observed, examining the injuries more closely. "But look at these older scars." "She's been caught in traps before." 3 times in 2 years, Ellie confirmed, her voice hardening. "Someone's hunting her specifically. They know her patterns, know where she goes. This isn't random poaching. This is personal." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of a car engine echoed from the front of the cabin. Spirit's ears perked up immediately, and she struggled to rise despite her injuries. Ellie placed a calming hand on the bear's massive head. "Stay calm, baby girl. Mama will handle this." But when she looked out the front window, Her face went pale. "Oh, Lord, it's Rick." Through the window, Sam watched a well-dressed man in his 50s emerge from an expensive sedan, his face set in grim determination. He carried a briefcase and several manila folders, the tools of someone who'd come to conduct serious business. "My son," Ellie whispered, her voice trembling with sudden fear. "He can't see spirit." "He's been trying to get me declared incompetent so he can sell the land. If he finds out about her—" The implications hit Sam like a physical blow. If Richard Blackwood discovered his mother harboring a wild bear, it would give him exactly the ammunition he needed to have her committed and claim control of her property. Everything Ellie had built with Spirit, this impossible, beautiful relationship, would be destroyed in an instant. Spirit seemed to understand the danger. Without any command from Ellie, she began moving toward the back door, her movements careful but determined despite the pain from her wounds. Richard Blackwood's polished dress shoes crunched on the gravel driveway as he approached his mother's cabin, each step weighted with the gravity of what he'd come to do. The manila folders under his arm contained legal documents that would change everything: power of attorney papers, property assessments, and preliminary contracts with Smoky Mountain Development Corporation. His wife Sarah's latest medical bills burned in his jacket pocket like accusations, reminders that time was running out for more than just his mother's independence. Inside the cabin, panic moved with swift efficiency. Sam helped Spirit toward the back door while Ellie frantically wiped blood from her kitchen floor with paper towels. The bear's intelligence shone through her pain as she seemed to understand the need for silence, her massive paws making no sound on the wooden boards despite her injuries. "The barn," Ellie whispered urgently. "Take her to the barn." "There's a stall in the back with clean hay." She pressed a bottle of antiseptic and fresh bandages into Sam's hands. "Keep her quiet no matter what you hear from the house." The front door's knock echoed through the cabin like gunshots. "Mom, it's Rick. We need to talk." Sam guided Spirit through the back door just as Ellie called out, "Come in, honey. Just let me put some coffee on." Her voice carried the false cheer of someone buying time, but Sam could hear the tremor underneath. In the barn, Spirit settled into the hay with a soft grunt of pain. Sam examined her wounds more carefully in the dim light filtering through the wooden slats. The trap had done significant damage, but what troubled him more were the older scars, evidence of a systematic campaign against this particular bear. Someone had been hunting Spirit with determination and resources that suggested this wasn't about money or sport. "You're special, aren't you, girl?" Sam murmured, applying fresh antiseptic to the wounds. Spirit's blue eyes fixed on his face with an intelligence that seemed almost human. "Someone knows exactly what you mean to her." Through the barn walls, raised voices carried from the cabin. Rick's attorney training evident in his measured but insistent tone, while Ellie's responses grew increasingly defensive. "Mom, I've been patient, but this has gone far enough. Mrs. Henderson called me yesterday. She said she saw you talking to trees again, carrying on full conversations with nobody there." "Mrs. Henderson needs to mind her own business," Ellie shot back. "I've been talking to these trees since before you were born. They're better listeners than most people." "That's exactly what I'm talking about." Rick's voice rose. "You're 81 years old, living alone on 200 acres with no neighbors for miles. What if you fall? What if you have another episode like last month?" Sam's heart clenched. Ellie had mentioned nothing about episodes, but the fear in her voice when Rick brought it up suggested this was a significant development. The idea of this remarkable woman losing her independence, her connection to Spirit, made his chest tight with grief. "I'm fine, Richard. I've been taking care of myself and this land longer than you've been alive." "The land that's bleeding money every year in taxes and maintenance," Rick countered. "Mom, I've got buyers interested. Real money. Enough to set you up in the finest assisted living facility in Tennessee with full medical care and I don't want assisted living. Ellie's voice cracked with emotion. I want my home. I want my land. I want to die in the same place I was born, where your father proposed, where we raised you. Dad's been dead 12 years, Mom. Holding on to memories isn't going to bring him back. The cruelty of those words hung in the air like smoke. Even from the barn, Sam could feel the silence that followed, heavy with hurt and disappointment. When Ellie spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Sometimes I forget how much you sound like those development men who came by last month. All business, no heart. Development men? Rick's tone sharpened. What development men? When? Sam pressed his ear closer to the barn wall. This was news to him as well, and judging by the surprise in Rick's voice, his son knew nothing about it either. 3 weeks ago, Ellie said reluctantly. Fancy suits, big promises about jobs and progress. Said my land was perfect for some resort project. I told them what I told you, not interested. Did you sign anything? Give them permission to survey? Of course not. What do you take me for? But Sam heard the uncertainty in her voice, and apparently Rick did too. Mom, I need you to think carefully. Did they leave any papers? Ask you to sign anything at all? The silence stretched too long. Spirit stirred restlessly in the hay, as if sensing the tension even through the walls. There might have been some survey permission thing, Ellie admitted finally. They said it was just to assess the environmental impact, that it didn't mean I was agreeing to sell. Rick's explosive curse carried clearly to the barn. Mom, environmental impact surveys are the first step in development approval. If they have your signature on that, they can claim you entered into preliminary negotiations. But I didn't agree to anything. It doesn't matter what you intended, Rick said, his lawyer instincts taking over. What matters is what you signed. Do you still have copies? Sam heard drawers opening, papers rustling. This explained the systematic trapping, the GPS devices, the targeting of Spirit specifically. If Smoky Mountain Development Corporation was trying to force Ellie off her land, removing the dangerous wildlife she was known to protect would strengthen their case for development. Here, Ellie said. But Rick, I swear I thought it was just a formality. The silence that followed was ominous. When Rick spoke again, his voice carried the weight of professional defeat. Mom, this isn't just a survey permission. This is a preliminary agreement to negotiate. You've given them legal standing to pursue development of this property. Spirit whined softly, as if she too understood that everything had just changed. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut when Sam decided he could no longer remain hidden. Spirit's labored breathing had grown more concerning, and the conversation he'd overheard suggested that Ellie's situation was far more dire than anyone had realized. Taking a deep breath, he emerged from the barn and knocked on the back door. Mrs. Blackwood, it's Sam Whitehorse. I heard voices and thought I'd check on you. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long before Ellie's voice called out, Come in, Sam. I suppose it's time you met my son. Sam entered to find Rick Blackwood standing in the middle of the kitchen, his expensive suit and polished shoes looking wildly out of place in the rustic cabin. Legal documents were spread across Ellie's wooden table like evidence of some terrible crime. Rick's face carried the haggard expression of a man fighting battles on multiple fronts. Richard, this is Sam Whitehorse, Ellie said with forced composure. He's been helping me with some wildlife issues on the property. Rick's handshake was firm but distracted, his lawyer instincts clearly evaluating this unexpected variable in his already complicated situation. Wildlife issues? Poachers, Sam said simply. Someone's been setting illegal traps on your mother's land. Professional-grade equipment, not some local hunter looking for dinner. This information hit Rick like a physical blow. He sank into one of Ellie's kitchen chairs, running his hands through his graying hair. This keeps getting worse. Mom, if there's illegal activity happening on your property and the development company finds out, they could claim you're not maintaining proper stewardship of the land. What exactly is going on with this development company? Sam asked, his voice carefully neutral. Rick gestured helplessly at the papers scattered across the table. Smoky Mountain Development Corporation. They somehow convinced my mother to sign preliminary agreements for environmental surveys. In Tennessee law, that gives them standing to pursue development rights, even if the property owner changes their mind. Sam studied the documents, his expression growing increasingly grave. These dates. The surveys were supposed to begin 3 weeks ago, right around the time the first GPS-tracked traps appeared. GPS-tracked traps? Rick's head snapped up. You mean someone's using technology to monitor their trapping activity? Sam nodded grimly. Military-grade equipment. This isn't about poaching for profit. Someone's conducting a systematic removal operation. The implications settled over the kitchen like a dark cloud. Ellie's hands trembled as she poured coffee, the cups rattling against their saucers. Are you saying they're trying to clear the wildlife off my land to make development easier? It's a common tactic, Rick admitted reluctantly. Remove any environmental obstacles before the official surveys begin. If they can prove there's no significant wildlife population, environmental protection laws become much easier to navigate. A low rumble from outside made all three of them freeze. Through the kitchen window, they could see a black SUV with corporate plates pulling into the driveway. 2 men in suits emerged, carrying briefcases and surveying equipment. They're here, Ellie whispered, her face going pale. The development men. They said they might come back this week. Sam's mind raced. Spirit was hidden in the barn, wounded and vulnerable. If these corporate representatives discovered her, it would not only expose Ellie's secret but potentially give them ammunition to claim the property was unsafe for development due to dangerous wildlife. The irony was bitter. Spirit's presence could either save or destroy Ellie's chances of keeping her land. Mom, go stall them, Rick said, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, just tell them you need time to review with your attorney. That's me, by the way. What about the bear? Ellie whispered desperately. Rick's eyes widened. What bear? The question hung in the air like a ticking bomb. Sam saw the moment of decision in Ellie's eyes, the choice between maintaining her secret and trusting her son with the truth that could save or damn them all. The bear I've been caring for, she said quietly. The one those men have been trying to trap and kill. Rick's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, shock, and finally, resigned understanding. Oh, Mom. Please tell me you haven't been harboring a wild bear on this property. She's not wild, Ellie said with fierce protectiveness. She's family. Before Rick could respond, a knock on the front door interrupted them. Through the window, they could see the 2 corporate representatives waiting with practiced patience, their surveying equipment gleaming in the afternoon sun. Go, Sam urged. Both of you. I'll handle things out back. As Ellie and Rick moved toward the front door, Sam slipped out the back and hurried to the barn. Spirit raised her massive head as he approached, those intelligent blue eyes reading his tension immediately. The bear's wounds had stopped bleeding, but she was still weak from blood loss and stress. Easy, girl, Sam whispered, checking her bandages. We need you to stay very quiet for a while. Can you do that? As if she understood every word, Spirit settled deeper into the hay, her breathing becoming deliberately shallow and controlled. Sam marveled again at the creature's intelligence and apparent understanding of human situations. From the cabin, he could hear the conversation beginning. Rick's lawyer voice, professional but cautious, asking questions about permits and environmental assessments. The corporate representatives' responses were smooth and confident, clearly accustomed to dealing with property owners who didn't fully understand the legal implications of what they'd signed. "Mrs. Blackwood, we're simply here to complete the environmental survey you agreed to. Our team will need access to the entire property for the next several days." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Rick interjected. "As Mrs. Blackwood's attorney, I need to review all documentation before any survey work begins. Mr. Blackwood, your mother has already signed the necessary agreements. We have legal right of access for environmental assessment purposes." Sam's blood ran cold. If they had legal right of access, they could search the entire property, including the barn. Spirit would be discovered and everything would unravel in the worst possible way. But then he heard something that changed everything, the distant rumble of another vehicle approaching. Through a crack in the barn wall, he watched a Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency truck pull up behind the corporate SUV. Two uniformed officers emerged, their expressions serious and official. The lead officer approached the group gathered in Ellie's front yard. "Afternoon, folks. I'm Officer Jenkins with Wildlife Resources. We've received reports of illegal trapping activity in this area. I'm going to need to speak with everyone present about what they might have seen or heard." Sam's heart leaped. Someone, possibly Jake Crow Feather or another local, had reported the illegal traps. The corporate representative's confident demeanor immediately shifted to one of nervous concern. "Officers, we're simply conducting a routine environmental survey," one of the corporate men said. "We weren't aware of any trapping issues." "Well, sir, illegal trapping on property you're surveying becomes your responsibility under state law. We're going to need to inspect any equipment you've brought onto the property." Sam watched through the barn slats as the wildlife officers began examining the corporate surveying equipment. It didn't take long for them to discover something that made both officers exchange significant looks. "Mr. Thompson," Officer Jenkins said to one of the corporate representatives, "this GPS unit in your equipment case is registered to Smoky Mountain Development Corporation. Same model as the tracking devices we've been finding on illegal traps throughout this area." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The development company hadn't just been conducting surveys, they'd been actively involved in the illegal trapping operation designed to clear wildlife from the property before development began. Rick's lawyer instincts kicked into overdrive. "As officers, I believe you'll find that my client was unaware of any illegal activities. She was told these were routine environmental surveys." "Ma'am," Officer Jenkins addressed Ellie directly, "have you seen any evidence of illegal trapping on your property?" Ellie looked toward the barn where Sam and Spirit were hidden, then back at the wildlife officer. Sam could see her internal struggle. Tell the truth and expose Spirit, or lie to officers and potentially lose her chance to stop the development company. "Yes," she said finally, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I've seen traps, and I know exactly where you can find the evidence you need." The next 24 hours unfolded like a perfectly orchestrated storm. Officer Jenkins and his partner followed Ellie through the forest to where Sam had discovered the original trap, their metal detectors quickly locating 3 more sophisticated snares buried along Spirit's known travel routes. Each trap bore the same GPS technology found in the corporate surveying equipment, building an irrefutable case of environmental sabotage. By sunset, the Smoky Mountain Development Corporation representatives were in custody, their preliminary agreements with Ellie declared void due to fraud and illegal activity. Rick worked his legal contacts through the night, ensuring that all contracts were properly nullified and that his mother's property rights were fully restored. But the victory felt hollow when Sam discovered Spirit missing from the barn the next morning. "She's gone," he told Ellie, his voice heavy with concern. "No blood trail, no signs of struggle. She just left." Ellie's face crumpled with grief. She knew. Somehow she knew the danger was over, and she didn't need to hide anymore. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. 8 years we've been family, and she just disappeared without saying goodbye. Rick found them in the barn, both staring at the empty stall where Spirit had recovered. The past 24 hours had transformed his understanding of his mother completely. Watching her courage in exposing the development company's illegal activities, seeing the depth of her connection to the land and its creatures, he realized how wrong he'd been about her mental state. "Mom," he said gently, "I owe you an apology. I thought you were losing your mind, but you were protecting something precious that I couldn't see." "Your father always said the mountain chooses who belongs here," Ellie replied, wiping her eyes. "I thought maybe Spirit had chosen me, but maybe I was just a temporary shelter until she could find where she really belonged." The sound of breaking branches in the forest beyond the barn made all three of them freeze. Through the trees came a sight that stopped their hearts. Spirit moving slowly but deliberately toward them, and she wasn't alone. 3 small black shapes tumbled around her feet, cubs so young their eyes were barely open. Spirit had given birth sometime during the night, and now she was bringing her babies to the only safe place she knew. "Oh, my Lord," Ellie whispered, sinking to her knees as Spirit approached. "She came back. She brought them home." Spirit moved carefully, her maternal instincts warring with her trust in the humans who had saved her. When she reached Ellie, she gently nudged one of the cubs forward with her massive nose, then looked up at the old woman with those extraordinary blue eyes. Sam's throat tightened with emotion as he understood what he was witnessing. "She's presenting them to you. In bear behavior, this means she considers you part of her family group. She wants your approval of her cubs." Rick stood transfixed as his elderly mother gently picked up the tiny cub, no bigger than a kitten, and cradled it against her chest. The cub nuzzled into her warmth while Spirit watched approvingly, clearly trusting Ellie completely with her most precious possessions. "They're beautiful," Ellie murmured, tears flowing freely now. "Perfect little miracles." But their joy was interrupted by the rumble of approaching vehicles. A convoy of trucks was coming up the mountain road, official vehicles with government plates and the logo of the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. Officer Jenkins emerged from the lead truck, followed by what appeared to be a full wildlife management team. His expression was serious but not unkind as he approached the remarkable scene of woman, bear, and newborn cubs. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said carefully, "we need to talk about the situation here. Reports of a habituated bear with cubs on private property require immediate intervention for public safety." Ellie's face went pale. The cubs were too young to survive relocation, and separating Spirit from her babies could result in the death of all 3 cubs. After everything they'd been through, the authorities were going to destroy the family they'd fought so hard to protect. "Officer," Rick stepped forward, his lawyer instincts engaging, "my mother's property is private land, properly posted, with no public access. There's no immediate danger to public safety." "Sir, a habituated bear is considered dangerous regardless of location. Our protocols require immediate removal and relocation of the animals." Sam felt his world tilting. After losing his granddaughter, after finding purpose again in protecting wildlife, he couldn't bear to watch another family destroyed by bureaucratic protocols. What if there was another solution? He asked quietly. Officer Jenkins turned to him with weary patience. "Mr. Whitehorse, I understand your concern, but we have procedures. What if this property became an official wildlife sanctuary?" Sam interrupted. "With proper permits, trained personnel, and safety protocols?" Rick's head snapped up. "Sam, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking your mother has 200 acres of prime habitat, a natural caregiver with 8 years of experience, and cubs that won't survive relocation." Sam's voice grew stronger as the idea took shape. "I'm thinking Tennessee needs more wildlife education programs, and this could be the perfect place to start." Officer Jenkins looked skeptical. Wildlife sanctuaries require extensive permits, professional veterinary oversight, educational programming. I'm a retired veterinarian with 40 years of experience, Sam said. Mrs. Blackwood has demonstrated remarkable skill in animal care. Her son is an attorney who could handle the legal requirements. And I have experience in large-scale project management, Rick added, his mind already working through the possibilities. We could develop educational programs, guided tours, partnerships with local schools. Ellie looked up from the cub in her arms, hope dawning in her eyes. You mean Spirit and her babies could stay? Legally? It would take months of paperwork, Officer Jenkins warned. State approval, federal permits, safety inspections, insurance requirements. And even then, there's no guarantee. But it's possible? Rick pressed. The wildlife officer studied the scene before him, an elderly woman cradling a bear cub while the mother watched with complete trust, a veterinarian willing to donate his expertise, and a successful attorney ready to navigate the legal maze. It's possible, he admitted finally. But in the meantime, we have immediate safety concerns. The bears would need proper containment, veterinary supervision, and safety protocols. The barn could be converted, Sam said immediately. I could move onto the property temporarily to provide round-the-clock care. We could install proper fencing within a week. Spirit seemed to sense the negotiation happening around her. She moved closer to Ellie, her massive body language expressing trust and hope that somehow these humans would find a way to keep her family safe. I'll give you 30 days, Officer Jenkins said finally. 30 days to file the preliminary sanctuary applications and demonstrate proper care facilities. If everything's not in perfect order by then, the bears get relocated. As the wildlife management team departed, the three humans stood with Spirit and her cubs in the golden afternoon light, each understanding that their lives had just changed forever. The sanctuary dream crumbled exactly 18 days later when everything went catastrophically wrong. It started with Rick's phone call at 3:47 a.m. Sarah's cancer had returned with a vengeance, spreading to her liver and lungs. The experimental treatment that had shown such promise had failed, and now she needed immediate surgery that their insurance wouldn't cover. The cost? $600,000 due within 2 weeks or the surgery would be postponed indefinitely. I have to sell the land, Mom, Rick said through tears as he sat in Ellie's kitchen the next morning. I can't let Sarah die when I have the means to save her. The development company lawyers had been circling like vultures since their arrest, replaced by an even more aggressive firm that specialized in hostile property acquisitions. They'd found a legal loophole. While the original contracts were void, they could still file for eminent domain if they could prove public benefit from development. They're claiming the resort will bring jobs to the area, Rick explained, his voice hollow with defeat. With Sarah's medical situation, I can't fight them. I need to take their offer and get the money to Nashville. Ellie's world collapsed around her. Spirit and her cubs had been thriving in their temporary enclosure, but the sanctuary paperwork was moving through bureaucratic channels at a glacial pace. Without the land, there would be no sanctuary, no legal protection for Spirit's family. Sam tried to hold everything together, but he was fighting his own demons. The stress of the situation had triggered nightmares about Emma's accident, and he'd been drinking heavily to silence the voices that told him he was failing another family he'd sworn to protect. Then came the morning when Sam arrived to find one of the cubs missing. She's gone, Ellie sobbed, pointing to the enclosure where only 2 cubs remained. Little Hope, the smallest one. I found the fence cut during the night. Spirit was frantic, pacing the enclosure and calling for her missing baby with heartbreaking vocalizations. The remaining cubs huddled together, sensing their mother's distress. Sam's blood ran cold as he examined the fence. The cuts were clean, professional. This wasn't the work of random vandals. Someone had taken the cub deliberately. The ransom note arrived that afternoon. Remove the bears voluntarily or lose them one by one. You have 48 hours. Rick was devastated. It's the development company. They're using Sarah's illness against us, knowing I'm desperate. They probably have connections to wildlife traffickers. Sam's hands shook as he read the note. This was exactly what had happened to Emma. Innocent life threatened because of adult conflicts, because he hadn't been strong enough or smart enough to protect what mattered most. "I can't do this again," he whispered, sinking into a chair. "I failed Emma, and now I'm failing Spirit and her babies." The breaking point came when Officer Jenkins arrived with devastating news. "I'm sorry, folks, but we've received reports of public safety concerns. With one cub missing and clear evidence of criminal activity, we have to remove the remaining bears immediately for their own protection." "You can't," Ellie pleaded. "Spirit won't survive being separated from her cubs. And we don't even know if Little Hope is still alive." "Ma'am, we don't have a choice. The bears will be relocated to a facility in North Carolina where they can receive proper protection." Spirit seemed to understand what was happening. As the wildlife officers prepared the transport crates, she positioned herself between her remaining cubs and the humans, her eyes filled with betrayal and confusion. After 8 years of trust, her human family was allowing strangers to take her babies away. Sam watched in horror as they loaded the first cub into a crate. The tiny creature's cries pierced his soul, reminding him of every failure, every time he'd been too late to save someone who needed him. That night, as they prepared to load Spirit and the second cub the next morning, Ellie sat alone in her kitchen, staring at the bottle of sleeping pills her doctor had prescribed for her arthritis pain. The label warned against taking more than 2, but the bottle contained at least 30 pills. "I can't watch them take her," she whispered to the empty room. "I can't live knowing I failed the only family I had left." Meanwhile, Sam sat in his truck outside the local bar, a loaded pistol in his lap and a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the seat beside him. The weight of his failures, Emma's death, Spirit's capture, Little Hope's disappearance, pressed down on him like a physical force. Rick paced his hotel room in Nashville. Sarah's latest test results spread across the bed like a death sentence. The development company's final offer lay on the nightstand, enough money to save his wife, but only if he signed within 24 hours. As dawn approached, 3 broken people faced their darkest moments, each believing they had no choice but to surrender to forces beyond their control. The truth arrived in the most unexpected way at 5:23 a.m. when Jake Crow Feather's battered pickup truck roared up Ellie's driveway with a terrified bear cub crying in a makeshift carrier in the back. Jake burst through Ellie's kitchen door without knocking, his face a mask of rage and guilt. "They made me take her," he said, gently lifting Little Hope from the carrier. "Told me it was just to scare you into selling. Said they'd release her back to you once the papers were signed." Ellie's hands trembled as she reached for the frightened cub, tears streaming down her face. Hope was thin and dehydrated but alive, her tiny claws gripping Ellie's shirt as she burrowed into the familiar warmth. "Who, Jake?" "Who hired you?" Sam asked, though his heart was already beginning to piece together the devastating answer. "Richard Blackwood," Jake said, the words falling like stones into the silence. "He contacted me 3 weeks ago. Said his mother was being stubborn about selling the property his wife needed to survive. Asked me to set traps to remove the dangerous wildlife she was protecting." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Sam felt the air leave his lungs as the implications crashed over him. Rick hadn't been fighting to save his mother's land. He'd been orchestrating its destruction from the beginning. "He knew about Spirit all along," Ellie whispered, her voice broken. "He knew I was caring for her, and he used it against me." Jake's guilt poured out in a torrent of words. "He said you were getting senile, that the bears were dangerous, that he was protecting you. Made it sound like he was saving you from yourself. The GPS tracking was supposed to make the trapping more humane, quick capture and relocation instead of killing. But then the development company got involved, Sam said, understanding dawning. Yeah, they found out about the traps and took over the operation. Started talking about permanently removing the wildlife, not just relocating. That's when I knew I'd been played. Jake's hands clenched into fists. Rick Blackwood used my desperation against me. I needed the money for my kids, and he made it sound like we were doing the right thing. The sound of approaching vehicles made them all freeze. Through the window, they could see Rick's sedan, followed by 2 wildlife transport trucks. He'd arrived for the final removal of Spirit and her remaining cub, probably expecting to find his mother devastated and ready to sign anything. But when Rick entered the kitchen and saw Jake holding the missing cub, his carefully constructed facade crumbled instantly. "Jake, what are you doing here? I told you to keep the cub until after the transport." The words hung in the air like an admission of guilt. Ellie's face went through a transformation that was terrible to witness, the dawning realization that her own son had orchestrated her destruction. "You," she whispered, her voice carrying a pain that seemed to come from her very soul. "It was you all along." Rick's attempt at justification was pathetic. "Mom, you don't understand. Sarah is dying. The doctors say she has weeks, maybe days. If she doesn't get this surgery, I had to find a way to raise the money." "By destroying everything I love?" Ellie's voice grew stronger, fueled by betrayal and grief. "By terrorizing Spirit and her babies? By making me believe I was losing my mind?" "The bears were never going to be hurt," Rick protested. "It was supposed to be simple relocation, just enough to clear the environmental obstacles for development. You would have been set for life in a nice facility with full medical care." Sam stepped forward, his own guilt and self-loathing transforming into protective rage. "You manipulated everyone. Your mother, Jake, even the development company. You orchestrated this entire nightmare because you were too proud to ask for help." "Help?" Rick's composure finally shattered completely. "Help from who? Mom barely has enough for her own expenses. You're a retired vet living on a pension. Who exactly was going to come up with $600,000? The question hung in the air as Officer Jenkins and his team prepared to remove Spirit and her cub from the enclosure. Through the window, they could see Spirit's desperate attempts to reach her babies, her massive body pressing against the fence as she watched strangers approach her remaining cub. But then something unprecedented happened. Jake Crow Feather, a man who had spent weeks helping destroy this family, made a choice that would change everything. "Officer Jenkins," he called out, walking toward the wildlife team with deliberate purpose. "I need to file a formal complaint against myself and Richard Blackwood for conspiracy to commit wildlife trafficking." Rick's face went white. "Jake, what are you doing?" "What I should have done weeks ago," Jake replied. "I'm telling the truth." As Jake detailed the conspiracy to Officer Jenkins, providing evidence of payments from Rick and communications with the development company, another vehicle appeared on the mountain road. This one was different. A news van from WTVF Nashville, followed by 2 more media vehicles. Sam's heart sank. Media attention would only make things worse for Spirit and her family. But as the reporters set up their cameras, he realized something extraordinary was happening. The lead reporter was interviewing not just about the wildlife trafficking conspiracy, but about the remarkable bond between Ellie and Spirit. Someone, probably Jake, had told them the real story. The 8 years of secret care, the intelligence and trust of the blue-eyed bear, the attempt to create a sanctuary. "Mrs. Blackwood," the reporter asked gently, "can you tell us about your relationship with Spirit?" For the first time in days, Ellie's voice was strong and clear. With little hope cradled in her arms, she told the world about finding a dying cub 8 years ago, about the gradual building of trust, about the extraordinary intelligence and gentleness of a bear that defied every stereotype. The camera captured Spirit in the enclosure, her blue eyes fixed on Ellie with unmistakable devotion, her maternal desperation as she tried to reach her cubs. It captured the moment when Officer Jenkins, moved by what he was witnessing, made an unprecedented decision. "Ma'am," he said to Ellie, "would you be willing to surrender temporary custody of the bears to the state while we investigate these trafficking charges? They could remain here on your property under state supervision until the legal situation is resolved." Rick's final desperate gambit was to claim his mother was mentally incompetent and couldn't make legal decisions. But Jake's testimony had revealed Rick's own criminal behavior, and 3 local doctors who had examined Ellie at her request testified that she was completely mentally sound. As the sun set on that terrible day, the news story began spreading across social media. The image of an elderly woman cradling a bear cub while the mother watched through a fence became viral within hours. Spirit Bear and #EllieMay began trending nationally. But for Rick Blackwood, sitting in the back of a police car facing federal wildlife trafficking charges, the viral fame meant nothing. His wife Sarah was still dying. The money he'd destroyed his family to obtain was further away than ever, and he'd lost the respect and love of the only parent he had left. The true scope of his betrayal became clear when investigators revealed that Rick had been planning this operation for over a year, carefully documenting his mother's eccentric behavior with wildlife as evidence of mental incompetence. He'd manipulated Jake's desperation, exploited the development company's greed, and sacrificed his mother's happiness for money that would never come. As news of the conspiracy spread, something beautiful began to happen. Donations started pouring in. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of people touched by the story of Spirit and Ellie's extraordinary bond. But it was too late for Rick's marriage. Sarah, watching the news coverage from her hospital bed, made her own devastating choice. Unable to live with the knowledge of what had been done in her name, she filed for divorce and refused any money that might come from the viral story. The man who had destroyed his family to save his wife discovered that his wife could not be saved by destroying someone else's love. 6 months later, the Great Smoky Mountains Wildlife Sanctuary stood as a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and second chances. The viral story of Ellie and Spirit had raised over $2.8 million from donors around the world, creating not just a sanctuary, but a model for human-wildlife coexistence that was being studied by conservationists internationally. Sam Whitehorse walked through the professionally constructed habitat area, his veterinary certification officially renewed by the state of Tennessee. At 71, he'd found a purpose that filled the Emma-shaped hole in his heart. Spirit's 3 cubs, now 6 months old and thriving, tumbled around their spacious enclosure like oversized puppies, their blue eyes a perfect inheritance from their remarkable mother. "Dr. Sam," called 8-year-old Emma Patterson, Rick's daughter, as she ran toward him with a small bucket of fish. The irony of her name wasn't lost on anyone. When Rick had named her, he'd chosen to honor the granddaughter Sam had lost, never knowing how prophetic that choice would become. The little girl had been living with Ellie for 4 months now, ever since Sarah's death and Rick's incarceration. The courts had granted Ellie custody, recognizing that the child needed stability and love more than anything else. Emma had taken to calling Ellie Grandma May and had become Spirit's most devoted human friend besides Ellie herself. "Look, Dr. Sam," Emma pointed excitedly toward the main enclosure. "Spirit's teaching the babies how to fish in the new pond." Sam smiled as he watched the extraordinary scene. Spirit stood chest-deep in the crystal-clear water that donors had helped install, demonstrating fishing techniques to her 3 cubs. The largest cub, a male they'd named Hope's brother, Courage, was already showing remarkable aptitude. The two smaller females, Grace and Faith, preferred to play rather than learn, but Spirit was patient with all of them. "She's an amazing mother," Emma said with the wisdom of a child who'd experienced both loss and redemption, just like Grandma May. Ellie emerged from the sanctuary's new visitor center, where she'd been leading a tour for a group of school children from Nashville. At 82, she moved with renewed purpose and energy. The sanctuary had given her life meaning beyond her wildest dreams, and caring for Emma had filled her days with the kind of joy she'd thought she'd never experience again. The children loved hearing about Spirit's intelligence, Ellie told Sam as she joined them by the pond. One little boy asked if Spirit could really understand human words, so I called her over and asked her to show them her favorite sleeping spot. She walked right to it and lay down. This had become one of the sanctuary's most popular demonstrations. Spirit's ability to respond to complex verbal instructions amazed visitors and had been documented by animal behaviorists from 3 universities. Her bond with Ellie seemed to have created a level of interspecies communication that challenged conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. The afternoon's scheduled programming included something special: a video call with Rick, who was serving his sentence at a minimum security federal facility in North Carolina. The prison's rehabilitation program had allowed him to complete coursework in environmental law, and he'd been working with his former law colleagues to draft legislation protecting wildlife sanctuaries from corporate exploitation. Emma bounced with excitement as they set up the computer in the visitor center. Despite everything that had happened, Ellie had insisted on maintaining the father-daughter relationship. "Children need their parents," she'd told the family court judge, "even when those parents have made terrible mistakes." When Rick's face appeared on the screen, the transformation was remarkable. Gone was the desperate, driven man who'd orchestrated the conspiracy against his own mother. Prison had given him time to process his grief over Sarah's death and his guilt over the choices he'd made. His face carried new lines of genuine remorse and hard-won wisdom. "Hi, Daddy," Emma called out, pressing close to the screen. "Spirit had babies, and they're getting so big. Grace can already climb trees higher than me." Rick's eyes filled with tears as he listened to his daughter's enthusiastic chatter about her new life. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Are you taking good care of Grandma May?" "She takes care of me too," Emma said seriously. "We take care of each other, just like Spirit and her babies." When Emma ran off to show the cubs to some visiting donors, Rick's conversation with his mother grew more serious. "Mom, I need you to know how sorry I am," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I destroyed everything good because I was so afraid of losing Sarah that I couldn't see any other way." Ellie's response carried the wisdom of a woman who'd learned the true meaning of family through loss and redemption. "Richard, honey, fear makes us do terrible things sometimes. But love, real love, finds a way to heal even the worst wounds." "I don't deserve your forgiveness," Rick said. "I certainly don't deserve Emma living with you after what I put you through." "Forgiveness isn't about deserving," Ellie replied gently. "It's about choosing love over bitterness." Emma needs to know her father is a good man who made bad choices, not a bad man who can't change. Sam watched this exchange with profound respect for both mother and son. Rick's journey toward redemption had included taking full responsibility for his actions, refusing plea bargains that would have reduced his sentence, and using his legal skills to help other inmates navigate family court issues. The sanctuary's success had created opportunities none of them had imagined. National Geographic was filming a documentary about Spirit and Ellie's relationship. The Cherokee Nation had officially recognized the sanctuary as a place of spiritual significance. 3 major universities had established research partnerships to study human-wildlife communication. But perhaps most importantly, the sanctuary had become a place of healing for families dealing with loss and trauma. Veterans with PTSD came to work with the animals as part of their therapy. Children who'd experienced abuse found comfort in the unconditional acceptance of creatures who'd also survived human cruelty. Jake Crow. Feather had become the sanctuary's head of security and indigenous cultural programs, his knowledge of Cherokee traditions adding depth to the educational programming. His testimony against Rick had earned him immunity from prosecution, but more importantly, it had given him a chance to redirect his life toward protection rather than exploitation of wildlife. As the afternoon sun slanted through the trees, casting golden light across the sanctuary, Spirit emerged from the pond with her cubs trailing behind her. She moved with purpose toward the visitor center, as she did every evening at closing time. "She's coming to say goodnight," Ellie explained to the day's last tour group. "This is her routine. She checks on all the humans before settling her babies for the evening." Spirit approached the group calmly, her blue eyes scanning the faces of the visitors. When she reached Ellie, she gently touched her massive nose to the old woman's hand, a gesture of affection that never failed to move observers to tears. "8 years ago, I found a dying cub who needed a mother," Ellie told the visitors. "Today, she's taught me that family isn't about blood or species. It's about choosing to love and protect each other, even when it's difficult." As the visitors departed and the sanctuary settled into evening quiet, the 3 generations of the human family, Ellie, Sam, and Emma, sat on the porch of the expanded cabin, watching Spirit teach her cubs the evening foraging routine. Emma, drowsy from the day's excitement, leaned against Ellie's shoulder. "Grandma May, do you think my daddy will come home someday?" "I do, sweetheart," Ellie replied, stroking the child's hair. "And when he does, he'll find a family that never stopped loving him, even when love was hard." Sam reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. His failure to save Emma Patterson had led him to a place where he could save Spirit's family and help heal Rick's daughter. The guilt that had nearly destroyed him had transformed into purpose that gave meaning to his remaining years. In the enclosure, Spirit gathered her cubs close as darkness fell. The 3 young bears pressed against their mother's warmth, safe in the knowledge that they were protected and loved. Above them, the stars emerged in the clear mountain sky, and the ancient rhythms of the forest continued as they had for countless generations. The sanctuary had become more than a home for rescued wildlife. It was proof that love could triumph over fear, that forgiveness could heal the deepest wounds, and that families came in forms that transcended every boundary humans tried to create. As Ellie carried a sleeping Emma to bed and Sam secured the sanctuary for the night, Spirit watched over them all with those remarkable blue eyes that had first captured a lonely old woman's heart 8 years ago. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new opportunities to share the message of interspecies, love, and understanding. But tonight, in the peaceful quiet of the Tennessee mountains, 2 species that evolution had designed to fear each other rested together in perfect trust, proving that love truly knows no boundaries. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into. Ellie's story reminds us that love doesn't recognize boundaries, not age, not species, not the mistakes of our past. When her son's desperation nearly destroyed everything she held dear, it was forgiveness that rebuilt their family stronger than before. Spirit didn't just save Ellie from loneliness, she taught 3 generations that protection and care flow both ways in true relationships. Sam discovered that his greatest failure could become his most meaningful purpose, while little Emma learned that grandmothers and bear mothers share the same fierce, unconditional love. The sanctuary they built together proves that it's never too late for second chances, that broken trust can be mended with patience, and that the family we create through love and choice often becomes more precious than anything blood alone could provide. Rick's journey from betrayal to redemption shows us that even our darkest moments can lead to light if we're willing to face our mistakes honestly. In the end, happiness isn't found in holding on to what we've lost, but in opening our hearts to the unexpected love waiting to find us. What unexpected relationships have brought the most joy to your life? Have you ever discovered that forgiveness opened doors you didn't know existed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.